we're going to get started. I think we're on time, and I don't like not being on time. As the Hanford manager, I think you should appreciate that. I'm really grateful for the opportunity today to monitor, basically moderate my own panel, which is fun, because Mayor Casper can't threaten to kick me off, which is nice too. But we really have an exciting story to tell relative to the Tri-Cities and relative to the Hanford site that I think is important to talk about in a way that's maybe different than we have in the past. And it really kind of harkens back a little bit more to the relationship we've had as a community, both the site, PNNL, and the Tri-Cities, with a relationship that's nearly 80 years old. And really the phenomenal period of successful outcomes in a very, very challenging environment through the end of World War II, through the Cold War mission, and now through the cleanup mission. And we're really at a crossroads for the Hanford site in a fundamental transition in operating posture that takes us from a site of demolition and construction projects, and it's a vast site, as you recognize, to a site of 24/7, 365 operations with a new part of the mission, which is our top cleanup priority, but we just have been working for over the last 2 decades to put the conditions in place to start. As all of you know, this year we started with the tank side seizure removal system. We've completed 2 batches so far, 380,000 gallons completed. Actual number is 279,253, I think, or 379,253. And we'll continue on with that process through a few more batches towards our goal of 1 million gallons before the waste treatment plant is ready to vitrify. But if you think about the site as it stands today, 586 square miles, 2 DOE offices, 6 contractors, 6 contractor types. It's an EM only site. We operate under $2.7 billion a year, roughly per year, and we are striving to enter the next phase of the Hanford mission in parallel with also striving to transition with our DOE to community partnership as well. And so this is a 2-track panel, which is exciting in and of itself. Today I'm joined with some really great teammates that will talk about their aspects of what they're doing and work to tie this all together. So just as a rundown, we've got Wes Bryan, President of the Washington River Protection Solutions, our tank farm operator contractor. Val McCain from Bechtel, who's working to deliver the waste treatment plant. Steve Ashby from Pacific Northwest National Lab, the lab director. And I always appreciate Steve on a panel because the IQ of the panel that I'm on always goes up and he's a helpful balance to me. Bob Wilkinson from Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, and David Reedplug from the community. And I think the participants in the panel are an indication of the teamwork and the relationship we have in the Tri-Cities to move the mission forward. So I won't spend a lot of time. I kind of framed the transitions we're making as a site team this morning, but we'll start the first track will be the discussion of the transition that we're making at the Hanford site to start really the next chapter in the cleanup mission, which is the start of tank waste treatment. And to start that story, I'll introduce Wes Bryan, our tank farms operator.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity, really to try to tell the story because it is an exciting, it's an exciting time right now, and we're really going through what I would say is a transformation. When you look at where we are, as mentioned, with TSCR, we're treating waste for the first time. We're doing that on an industrial scale. But in addition to that, we're also undergoing a transformation of other facilities, the effluent treatment facility, as well as the liquid effluent retention facility, being able to create an additional 7 million gallons of wastewater capacity to be able to support direct feed low activity waste. Just building into those capabilities, not only with the facilities, but also the ancillary structures that go with that for for the people at Hanford, because at the end of the day, it's all about the people and making sure we've got them prepped to be able to carry out the mission. But just as we have with Tisker, as a demonstration project, we were very slow and methodical walking through the first 2 batches and understanding what we can learn about the equipment, because as we well know, there's a lot more to learn about the equipment as you operate it and learn about the process than you do just through startup testing. So we're doing that, and as we bring on the effluent treatment facility upgrades, we'll follow that same dynamic there. And I think as a big piece of the overall transformation is recognizing where the workforce has been, not only in the tank farms, but I think across the entire enterprise with all of us represented up here, is recognizing we're moving from a very static piece of operational philosophy to extremely dynamic, going through not just a 24/7 type operation, but really a production mindset. And when you look, just for a tank farm control room operator, recognizing they may go from 3 transfers last year up to upwards of 300 transfers, that's a big change. That's a huge transformation just for that one single watch bill position. But when you expand that out, not only to your control room operators, your field operators, your maintenance mechanics, your nuclear safety capability, your whole work plan and control, it's an entire culture change, and walking through the transformation there that's required in order to move to the capability to be able to respond in a much more timely manner, all with the end game of recognizing the scenario of what we have here, all called the Beauty and the Beast. With the WTP coming online, the tank farm's main mission is make sure we feed the beast. That is kind of our mantra, if you will, so we know what our role is, the production throughput required for Val and her team. It takes all of us as an integrated fashion. You'll see on the placemat that's being shown there, it takes every one of us working together in order to make sure we've got the feed available. So being able to do that, bring all the systems online, not only fine-tune the systems, but stop and learn through each aspect of that system, because at the end of the day, not only being able to operate, but being able to operate it in the most efficient way and ultimately up to nameplate capacity. In order for Val to get there, it takes us just the same to be aligned to be able to do that with how we treat the waste, get it staged, and have it prepped and ready in order to transfer it accordingly, to satisfy the feed requirements. And, just as a single transformation for us in the tank farms in the coming year, we'll be operating all of the equipment, kind of as Dave mentioned earlier. When you've got all the processes operating at one time, that's a big deal. That is a configuration we'll be in later this year. So that in itself is going from the mindset of we've been building and constructing through the readiness activity into operational aspects. So that's part of the transformation, and taking on a new mindset with the workforce, making sure they are aligned, understanding not only the requirements, but making sure that we're doing it right, because we subscribe to a basic philosophy. We're only in a hurry to do it right. So wherever it takes the time to do that and learn the process so that the entire mission moves forward in the most efficient fashion. It won't stop. It'll continue to improve with Val as her system comes online as well, so that we can continue to be consistent and just continue to make sure we carry forward the feed for Val and the rest of the team.
Thanks, Wes. And I put the placemat up, which is a way that we've used to communicate to our site community that really direct feed low activity waste is a site-wide machine. It requires both DOE offices, all of our contractors working together 24/7, 365 in ways that we haven't for really the duration of the cleanup mission in many ways to operate. And so this has helped our teams each reimagine what Hanford will look like in that new operating model, and to start to tear down some of those barriers to communications and build a sense of deliberate urgency but without sacrificing the safety culture. And I think, if you think about the safety culture, the ethics culture, the teamwork, that are all necessary across our entire enterprise to be successful, this picture of a site when it's in an operating mode really epitomizes that. And we're all connected, and there's nobody that's not a part of that team. And we have to operate at a pace faster than the machine can operate to maintain control. And that's where the teamwork aspect has been so important. And our maturation, again, through the pandemic has been phenomenal and really helpful to make sure we're all in the right mindset for what's coming in the future and be ready for the progress the mission when the site is ready for us to proceed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Val McCain to talk to us about the vitrification machine that she's building and where we are.
Thanks, Wes. I didn't know I was the beast in the Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
It's a beauty to see it, but it's a beast to keep feeding it, so.
That's a new one. All right. Well, I was listening to Wes, too, some of the words he was using, exciting, transformational, talking about the operational mindset and change is the same at the VIT plant as well. It's really an exciting time to be part of the team there at the VIT plant, and it's very transformational as we're really maturing ourselves from both a people, the plant, the paper aspects, and our operational readiness and building that operational culture. And so what I wanted to share today was just a bit of our progress along those 3 Ps, the people, plant, and paper, and share some news about some upcoming events here on the project. So from a people standpoint, it's really all about our hiring and training the workforce that we need to operate the VIT plant. And many of you have heard progress of that over the last couple of years, and we're making very good progress from that perspective. The heart of our workforce, since really we broke ground out at WTP, is the Central Washington Building Trades. And they have been with us since the beginning, and they are part of the operational workforce now. In fact, we probably have, it's over 200, maybe closer to 250 staff on that'll be part of that permanent plant staff coming through the building trades that are making up the plant operations team. And those are primarily our commissioning techs. And so those CTs, we now have 5 different crews of CTs that we brought on board and have been taking them through the very rigorous training that we have. They're on all shifts and are working 24/7 to operate the facilities as they are today. And we've also brought on lab techs and our initial group of rad contacts as well, and their training is underway. The interesting thing here and out of Hanford, this certainly at the VIT plant is a one-of-a-kind facility. And the workforce is brand new. So we don't have a workforce that we brought in from the local community that's trained up in operating a VIT plant. So new plant, new workforce. And so it's really important that our training is robust, and so we're taking the team through the various training paces. It's rigorous classroom training, it's simulator training, it's drills, and various proficiency demonstrations. And our crews are going through both individual training and then as crews themselves, and working to understand normal operating plant conditions as well as how to respond when there's a plant upset or an emergency situation, and just developing that overall proficiency to run the plant. Moving to the plant side, this is really all about the facilities itself. So that second P, the last year, in the past year, we had gone through all the construction, then through the startup testing, and now doing the integrated systems testing in the plant. And through all that experience, we learned some things from the plant as we're going. The operators are learning from the plant, gaining proficiency. And we've worked definitely through some challenges over the past few months for sure on different things, and the team has done a great job to resolve issues. And I'm really proud to say that we are just days away from heating up the first melter. And so it's a significant step in the life of the VIT plant, bringing the world's largest nuclear waste melter up and running. And so we're very excited about that. It's a lot of effort, and a lot of effort from the collective team here that has supported through the years, many in the room even, that have gone from the design of the melter and even supporting us today. We have some folks, I was talking to Brad Bowen earlier from Atkins, that are on the ground available to help us as we start initiating that process. So it's really a team effort, very exciting. And, but you know, it's the first step in a process, a lot of ways to go still on that. If you were able to see, we had a nice animation, 5 or 6 minutes long, out at the Bechtel table, and we'll get that distributed more broadly in the coming days so you can see the actual melter heat up process. Some people say, oh, is it just a flip of the switch? And it's a flip of the switch for about 2 months, so it's a little bit of a long flip of the switch, but the process is very, very cool to watch, and that animation, and so I would suggest that you take a look at it and see what we'll be doing. Once we go through that, we're going to move into the cold commissioning phase, and we will start to bring in tuning feeds and chemical simulants that will run through the plant in a very methodical and staged approach before we heat up the second melter. So we want to make sure we're learning everything we can in this first round. We will learn things over the next couple of months as we heat up the melter that we want to make sure that we can plow those lessons learned into the second one when we go. And so very exciting time from that perspective. I'm really proud of the team. And then from a paper perspective, this is really just making sure that we have all our plans, the procedures, the programs in place so that our team knows how to operate the plant safely and effectively. And there's thousands of procedures, and as we go through, it's an iterative process. We learn from the plant, we adjust procedures, then we may redo training, and so we want those 3 Ps to come together, and when it's right, then we go on to the next step and things. And so I want to just kind of end with maybe 2 more Ps, because everybody knows I talk about the 3 Ps a lot, but there's actually 2 more. The first one is partnership, and it is instrumental to what we're doing and the success of the project and to where we need to get to in advancing the mission that we're in partnership. And I can say with my colleagues up on the stage and the broader Hanford contractors, excellent partnership with our customer, and then also with the other stakeholders in the community. We've got several on board with David, and I saw Diane and others from the Tricities that support us, and also our building trades representatives and just the local community. You can really feel the sense of people getting behind the project and believing this is going to happen, because it is. And so we really couldn't do it without the partnership of everyone. And then the last one is pride. And it is really evident out at the workforce now and at the site, seeing the pride of being in the position to making history. This is a collective team here, many of you as well who've supported us, and we're making history out at Hanford, and that is something we should all be proud of. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share today, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Please, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a 6th P. P and an L. Right. So if you can resume the slides, because one thing you'll learn about national labs and lab directors, we can't speak without slides, and once we start, you can't stop us. And so Brian may have to intervene here.
I'm ready.
All right, so for those who don't know about the breadth of P&L, I just want to quickly summarize who are as one of the 17 DOE national laboratories. You can see here about $1.4 billion budget and 5,700 staff, and we've been growing about 300 staff per year net. For example, in the most recent year, we had to hire over 1,300 staff in order to achieve that growth because of attrition and competition for the talents. We've expertise in scientific discovery in various disciplines and areas that are relevant to DOE mission areas, writ large, but including the cleanup mission. And we apply that expertise and those capabilities that we steward for the department in sustainable energy and national security, applied areas of the department. And if you look at some of these capabilities, you'll recognize capabilities that really do trace back to our heritage from Hanford in terms of what we understand around the chemistry and the earth sciences related to the wastes. We understand the data science to analyze that. Even the biology comes into play here. And so there's a lot of capabilities we bring to bear on the Hanford mission. If I focus more directly on that, we are extremely proud of our Hanford heritage. And that's what we refer to it frequently when we're giving a little history lesson about what is P&L and where did it come from. So we do trace back to the Manhattan Project. We came out of the old Hanford Works, extracted as a lab in 1965. And because of that history, we know the site and its issues extremely well. I'd also like to point out that most of those 5,700 staff live and work in Richland and the Tri-Cities. And so we're not only proud of the work we do, we know how important it is for all of us and all our families to get this done right. And we're very grateful for the progress being made in the cleanup of that site and happy to contribute in our own small way. And so we are contributing to that cleanup. And we have, before I get to DF Law, a number of capabilities I just mentioned broadly that are focused on things that we're doing to help with the cleanup. And I show the 4 major areas here. One is in subsurface flow and transport. And I want to just pause here. When I was back as a graduate student, this is how I first got to know Hanford. I'm a computational scientist by training. I was doing some modeling. I needed a hard problem to test my algorithms on. Civil engineer next door turned out he was working on some groundwater modeling. Didn't realize at the time it was the Hanford site. I think progress accelerated greatly when I got off the project and moved into management. But still there's challenges there to understand that fate and transport of that complex chemistry underground. Second area is about waste characterization, particularly the tank wastes. And there we can bring in some of our unique characterization capabilities of the laboratory to really understand what's going on in those waste streams. And then the waste processing itself, supporting the challenges here in vitrification and the use of cement. And the final slide is really referencing to a number of unique capabilities we have at PNNL. Most of the national labs are distinguished by a set of user facilities or other capabilities. We have those too. One of them is our radiochemical processing laboratory, a set of hot cells, where we can really work with the materials coming out of Hanford and do some of the scientific analysis that informs our colleagues about what's going on to help them do their jobs better. And one of those capabilities is the radioactive waste treatment platform. I'll say more about that in a second. But these are some of the broad capabilities that we're bringing to bear on the mission. We're also supporting DF Law. And in particular here, there's 4 areas I'll just highlight. First is what we're doing to perform simulant and waste testing that in fact informed the original tank side cesium removal project. It's safety system design, safety basis, and operations. So there's one key contribution. We're all been celebrating the progress in that area. And today, we're leveraging that radioactive waste test platform within our Category 2 nuclear facility, the RPL, to mimic the TISCR system at lab scale. And we're able to look at pre-processed wastes from the first 3 tanks and identified some of the issues relevant to full-scale production facility. And we communicate that information to our colleagues for their use. And so these are key to verifying the performance prior to TISCR field operations. Second area I'll highlight is low-activity waste vitrification. It's a primary immobilization step to DF Law. And here we developed the original melter technology in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and it serves as the basis for the Law facility today. And we've also developed various glass formulations and models that are being used for Law vitrification startup and commissioning. We'll continue with the formulation and development of long-term glass performance testing to help improve the efficiency of operations and the disposal of that immobilized waste. And the final example I'll give is what we're doing in secondary waste immobilization. And here we can conduct work in grout formulation and development and testing to effectively immobilize secondary waste from Law processing for disposal in the integrated disposal facility. And we're also supporting the development of the field lasimeter test facility at Hanford to provide long-term performance test data in a realistic disposal environment to verify performance predictions for the disposal of glass and grout waste forms. So these are just a few of the things that we're doing at PNNL to support the important mission at Hanford and elsewhere in the EM complex. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we really appreciate the long history of partnership with PNNL and the great support they provide us in so many ways. And so I really appreciate Steve and Judd and the entire team. We really do benefit greatly from the very strong relationship. Next, let's turn it over to Bob Wilkinson, who you might think may not have a direct connection to direct feed low activity waste, but hold that thought until Bob tells you why he's so important to our mission. Bob?
Really important. Yeah, so a couple items, I just do a little deductive reasoning on this. So for us, for Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, where Brian was going with that is, you hear the people, plant, process, and all the other P's that go along with it. I've heard Brian introduce commonality as our role and responsibility is the sticky stuff in the middle, right? We are responsible to make sure that all those things come together in a way that allows effective execution of the mission in whatever form that mission is. And so our role is really to provide services, and I could go through the 300 services we provide, or the infrastructure that we provide that everybody naturally thinks: water, power, sewer, roads, all those big things. But at the end of the day, probably the biggest component that we're responsible for is to take and put everything together in an integration perspective. I'm probably one of the few that don't actually have talking notes, because my job is, I'll throw a new P out there, is my job is to pivot from what I hear from the others and bring together and show how everything kind of folds together. So you heard Wes talk about the static and dynamic, switching from static to a dynamic environment. You heard Val talk about people, plant, process. Brian introduced us as a 24/7 go to 365 operations. And so our job in this is to make sure that whatever that 24/7 operations, whatever that dynamic environment is, and right now it is the pride centered around start a DF law, but a proud but not satisfied moment. We'll be very proud when that starts. We won't be satisfied because the next day is we're actually going to be shifting the next part of the mission, which is or further ongoing cleanup of the waste tanks, tearing down buildings, which John Eschenberg, a little cardboard person we'll have over here sitting on the right, is tearing down buildings, digging up waste sites, and making all those things go. And so centered around that three kind of triangle: people, plant, and process. Everybody's talked about our workforces in the last couple of days. Every panel I've been on has talked about the struggles and all the dynamics going on with that, and the processes to change that we got to go, and how we got to change working with our workforce. To kind of put that in perspective from our ability to go do things, I'm just going to put some specifics on it. So, and I'll use HMIS, but I know our contractor partners are exactly the same. I just don't have the specific numbers with me. We have transitioned our workforce from those that have been silver tsunamis, although a few of us still look that way up here that are on this panel, into a new environment of people bringing on to bring different perspectives, be ready for that gear up. Most of the people that Val talks about in her control room are new folks to the Hanford site within the past 5 years and are new to that process. For us, HMIS, we have about 900 strong exempt personnel. Of that 900 strong, we're over 150 are less than 35 years old, and we're about 250 are new to the Hanford site in the last 5 years. I talked about less than 30. I chose less than 35 because we get a lot of our folks directly out of the military when they come out, because they bring the culture that we need, from the sense of urgency, from the safety culture, from that dynamic. So just, we're not done. We're nowhere done with that. We all talk about an ever-evolving marketplace that we're in, but from the people perspective is, our role collectively together is to work together to bring in new people. And the integration and the partnership that Val just talked about, Brian's talked about in the last couple panels, to put that in a little bit in perspective. We don't go to conferences now as individual entities selling our own wares. We go there selling one Hanford, right? So if Val gets a great chemical engineer, that's great. That helps Val do her job. If Wes gets an incredible operations manager that can manage the tank farms, that's incredible. If I can get somebody that brings to that, we're all going into the same pond and all that. And our folks may move around a little bit while they're in the different prime contractors. But we're aligned together, working together. We just had a veterans event tied with the local veterans community, and we were all there representing. Each one of us has a different lead in different areas of those, and we all support each other on a very regular basis. On the process part of it, we did establish a governance process. Brian Vance talked about that here in probably a couple different panels we've been on about how that process was kind of brought to bear during COVID and pressure tested at that. So I'm one of the few presidents that was here before COVID and during the contract changeover. Put that in perspective. My role was similar then, it is now, but the integration and the partnership is vastly different. Let me give you an example of that. I would send maybe 2, maybe 3 emails, maybe have 1 or 2 phone conversations per month with the other prime contractors, presidents or COOs. I probably have no less than probably 15 or 20 emails and phone conversations and text messages on a day-by-day basis as we do work today from that integration and that integrator perspective. And it is always about, hey, can we help facilitate some process that allows us to be well in front of something before it's a problem, or in maybe some cases it's something that just tactically happened in the last 24 hours that we're all working together. So back to Brian's question, I'll turn it back over to him. And, let me tell you about how we play in the middle of that. We are that sticky stuff in the middle. Most of the time, that sticky stuff in the middle is hopefully the glue that pulls it together, and not that's what's on the bottom of your shoe you're trying to scrape off. So we're always learning. We're always getting better and trying to get better. And I'll say it's kind of a proud but non-satisfied moment. You'll see where we, HMIS, will celebrate ultimately probably one of our business successes that we've ever had on the Hanford site is when Val actually has that plant powered up and running on that. And we'll be proud for that for about a day, and the next day we're going to move on to how do we get her to start pushing that waste through faster, right? So to feed the beast. And I'll end it with just this. I heard smart, the beast, must be the bookends that are the beautiful bald guys on the ends, right? So we're the beauty. Thanks, Brian. Sorry.
Oh, I don't know what to say. So I'll just, I thought it was really important as well to get the community perspective today, and I was grateful for David to join us on the panel today. And he'll be back for the second track as well. But David, if you could share with us the perspective that you bring to the table from the community relative to the current state of the waste treatment mission and our trajectory for the future.
I appreciate the good company I'm with here on the stage, especially the other beautiful bald guy at the end. Thanks for the shout out. But with the two tracks of the panel, I'm sort of wearing two different hats. And so I guess to preface my comments, I'll just talk a little bit about Hanford Communities and the role I serve as executive director for Hanford Communities. The organization was formed now over 25 years ago. When you think back in time to 25 plus years ago, the situation at the Hanford site was a lot different than it is today. I think the veil of secrecy that had kind of surrounded the Hanford site before was still kind of slowly being lifted. And the local governments really felt like they needed to get a better understanding of what exactly the risks were to the community, what was being done to address them. And as a result, they established Hanford Communities, and I got to give a shout out to Pam Brown-Larson, who is my predecessor as executive director and served in that role for over 25 years, so it's good that you're here, Pam. So the local governments wanted to really make sure that their voice was heard and that their constituents were being served by the cleanup mission. We have 7 local governments from the Tri-City area that are part of Hanford Communities, and five elected officials from the Tri-Cities are here at this conference today, which I think shows that 25 plus, more than a quarter century into the future, the Hanford Cleanup Mission is still of the utmost importance to the Tri-City community. We're excited to make cleanup happen, or to continue to make cleanup happen, and to move forward with not only cleanup, but what we're going to talk about with the second phase of our panel today. But ultimately, it's the Hanford community governing board members, constituents who are the people who are doing the work at the Hanford site, and so the focus on safety and making progress at the same time is critically important, and the focus on ensuring that those risks are continuing to be reduced at the Hanford site is important for all of the community. And I'm going to, I guess, continue the theme of workforce a little bit, because that's something that the Tri-Cities we've been fortunate in many respects that we've had sort of consistent and strong growth as a community, and we're facing issues that we in some respects haven't had to deal with in the past, including availability of workforce. But one of the things that we've done really well is partner together, much like the Hanford leadership team has partnered together, the community, and has partnered with them, but also with other entities like our higher educational institutions, our K through 12 systems. And so we stand ready to work with everybody who we need to make sure that workforce is ready into the future. And Wes talked a little bit about TISCR, and I think that's again something that, from the community's perspective, we're extremely pleased just to see how well that's become up and operational, and I think it really does set the stage for continued and future success with the startup and commissioning of the direct feed low-activity waste facility. So again, I just reiterate that from the community's perspective, this transition from kind of maintenance and ongoing work at the Hanford site to becoming a 24/7 operation is something that we're very aware of, that we want to be a success, that we want to do everything we can to make it a success, and then to continue with successful cleanup for the decades to come. And we're going to do what we can from the community side to work to continue to achieve alignment on some of the additional challenges that we have. And I appreciate that. See, David Bowen from the Department of Ecology is here as well, and to continue to do what we can to make sure that we're aligned and that we're making progress to ensure that the Hanford site is cleaned up in the most effective, efficient, and safe manner that we can. So, thank you.
Thanks, David. And I do appreciate you mentioning David Bowen as well. David has really worked well with us to make sure there wasn't any barriers to progress because we weren't having the permits issued on time. I think the number is 76 permits that we need. And we're down to, by the end of the calendar year, we'll be down to, I think, 1 or 2. And the team has done a phenomenal job working with David and his team to, clear that hurdle, which is sometimes a hurdle, but I'm grateful for the partnership and the progress we've made together in the relationship. And certainly, David has contributed to the mission in many, many ways as well. So that was theme 1, and it was really about where we are with the first transition, really tied on the Hanford site with this new phase of the mission we're entering. But I think as you heard throughout the week, the connection between the Department of Energy and the communities around each of our sites is really important and impactful to our ability to be successful. And so, when I think about the Tricities and I think about the department, I don't think about just the EM team. I think about the PNNL team and PNSO team and how we work together. And the things that we do are certainly reflected out into the community, whether it's the funding that comes to the community through PILT or property taxes for the folks that work on the site, the new opportunities that Steve and his team are creating through their innovation, potential commercial opportunities that will augment the very strong local small business community that we have in place to support the site. So there's really an exciting second transition that we as a Hanford, PNNL, Tri-Cities community are going through. And I wish I could trademark this as my own, but I can't. It's a clean up to clean energy transition that we'll make together, because the Hanford mission will, over time, maybe a long time, but over time will become smaller and smaller. And what Steve and his team are doing at the lab will become more of what the community is based on from a DOE community partnership through small businesses and innovation. And so I'd like Steve to talk a little bit more about that clean up to clean energy, trademark Sandra Haynes, WSU Tri-Cities, for framing that for us. But I think that's an important second transition that we don't talk enough about the broader partnerships between the Department of Energy and the communities in which we operate and serve. So Steve?
Okay, thanks. So as proud and excited I am about our contributions to the cleanup activity, I'm also extremely excited about where we're going next. We all recognize that we have an obligation to really clean up the site, but we also have an obligation to future generations to leave the planet in a better shape. And one of the things we've been working on at the laboratory, in fact, I had a call with DOE today about an effort I'll describe here in a moment, is what we can do to really lead by example in our transition to a clean energy future and one that results in net zero emissions. All right, and so let me talk about that a little bit, about setting a stage for it, because it's becoming a rallying point. There's a number of us within the community who've met in a variety of settings to talk about where we think this community needs to go. And that theme is becoming from clean up to clean energy. It is around a net zero future that's very much in line with where we need to go as a country, as a society, as a world. And it can begin right here in the Tri-Cities. And so if you look at that, let's imagine what that net zero future can look like. Right now, we're highly dependent on fossil fuels for a variety of purposes, but we know from the studies we have to get off of those and transition to clean energy sources. and roadmaps are being developed. The president has set a very ambitious goal for the United States to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Now, within the state of Washington, we're fortunate. We have certain advantages. We'll be getting all our electricity from clean sources in a time frame sooner than that. But if you think about what we can do here, it is a huge challenge to get to net zero. You think about the sources, it's not, when you think about everything that goes into it, from what we do as individuals to what our companies do to how society runs today. But it's not an impossible task. And so we think about some of the things we want to do. One of the things we're doing is we're one of 4 labs the Secretary of Energy designated as pilot labs for something she's called the Net Zero Labs Initiative. And here you can see her announcing this as part of the ARPA-E conference that was in Denver earlier this year. And you'll see my colleagues from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL, from the Idaho National Laboratory, INL, and from the National Energy Technology Laboratories, or NETL, joining us. And the 4 labs represent a very diverse set of campuses and operations, where I think we total 15,000 staff in 11 different sites. And so it's pretty diverse, and they're all brownfield sites. And as we were individually thinking about things, we realized we had that shared ambition, and we came together and pitched this to Deputy Secretary Turk, and he took it to the Secretary, and we said, we're willing to step forward, because we heard her desire for DOE to lean forward and lead by example. And we said, we think we can do that at our sites. There's different challenges at each of our laboratories. And this is not meant to be exclusive just to the 4 labs shown here, but our pilots, and we'll be engaged in the other labs as well. And we think what we learn here can help the communities in which we operate, but also help the world. Because when, if you were looking at COP 26 in Glasgow, you heard the Secretary announce the Net Zero World Initiative, in which he wants to leverage the power of DOE and the national labs to help other countries develop their own roadmaps to a net zero future. Because we can't do it just in the United States, we have to do it across the world. And so if you look at this, one of the things we're doing is we're leveraging what we call our N0 initiative at PNL. And when we looked at it as a leadership team, we realized that we have certain assets being located where we are, the state of our campus, and certain capabilities that we develop for various sponsors in DOE and elsewhere that we could bring to bear on our own campus. And so here we've made a commitment that we want to get to net zero by 2030. And we believe we can get about halfway there within 3 years, 75% in 5 years, and all the way there by 2030. And we'll do it with 24/7 carbon-free energy and in a resilient fashion. And this is going to be important. So what you see here is we have 4 R's that lead that pathway. One, we have to look at what we're doing to reduce our energy usage. We need to look at how we can replace fossil fuels with cleaner alternatives. We need to make sure we're doing it in a resilient fashion. And we need to leverage the research coming out of not just the national labs, but also academia and industry. And for example, when you look at PNL, one of the things we're realizing is that we can use technologies we developed for EERE, for buildings monitoring. And we use that to understand what's happening on our campus. We also can recognize as we construct new things, like our new chemistry facility, there's an energy transfer building with that. We can take the waste heat out of our supercomputers in one building and move them over to heat the new buildings. All right, and so that's one of the ways in which we can be more sustainable in our operations. And so for us, a big part of net zero is really around electrification. To us, it's what we're using for natural gas to heat our buildings, is the single largest source of PNL. Second, fugitive gases from our scientific instruments. So we're looking at this, but we've developed a pathway, and now what we're doing is looking at what we can do to work with others to leverage what we're learning and what we're committed to help the community more generally. And here what you're seeing is a picture of the Secretary, and you can barely make out Senator Cantwell with her at a round table they had in Richland. She had a similar one with community leaders in Sequim, Washington, where she also visited, where we have another campus. You can see here some of my colleagues, including there's Brian Vance at the end of the table. And it was really talking about, if you saw the title, it'd be around helping communities leverage the power of the labs to achieve net zero. And so it was a similar approach to what we're doing, and a recognition when I've talked to Brian and his team that we can really combine forces and help the Secretary lead by example in the Tri-Cities. And at the same time there, we recognized the Tri-Cities itself was embracing this. We've talked to some of the agricultural companies and concerns there. They're interested in participating, how they can take agricultural waste to useful fuel products. So when we look at what we're trying to do here, there's a number of areas that we think are relevant to Hanford, the community writ large, and that others can learn from. One is electrification of buildings, but also of transportation. Increasingly, we're turning to EV fleets. We're leading an EV effort for the department. And what do we do here to put smart charging stations all around the Tri-Cities, in particular Hanford and PNL? That's one thing we can do to hasten our pathway to net zero. We can also look at smart buildings. Now, what you're seeing here is a couple of pictures. The inset is something called Voltron. Small, it's about the size, about that big. It's hardware and software platform that you can add to existing buildings to allow the building loads to communicate across a campus and with the grid to negotiate the best time to use power, to keep your costs down, and keep the pressures in the grid down. We invented that. It's being licensed. We've used it in demonstration projects with companies where you show a 50% reduction in HVAC units on the rooftop. No retrofitting, you just put this device in, connected up to the sensors you have monitoring it. We've also put it in buildings in Toledo, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. What about using that in settings like the Spokane Eco District, which is you're seeing here, partnership that we're part of with McKinstry and Avista? Can we bring that kind of technology to the Tri-Cities? I think the answer is yes. And if you look at what we're doing, one of the things we enjoy in the Tri-Cities, besides a lot of sun, is some great wine. All right, and also if you like your French fries, they're coming from the Tri-Cities. What can we do to take that agricultural waste and turn it into higher value products? That's the magic of that chemistry I mentioned earlier, where we can use catalysis to transform those bio-wastes into high value products. So now you're getting a second revenue stream out of these. We've been talking to Lamb Weston and others about that opportunity to create that. And what if you could take that potato or grape waste and turn it into a biodiesel that one day might help Hanford run the VIT plant? Feed the beast in a green way. All right? And then finally, we have to worry about energy resiliency in all our operations. We have missions that perform. We can't afford to take intermittent renewables if it's going to be inefficient, or off and on. We have to be resilient 24/7. So those are some of the things we're looking at, and we're very excited about what this can look like for the future, and we're eager to engage Hanford and the community in doing so.
All right, thanks, Steve. And I also thought in this part of the conversation, I think it would be important for David to talk to the community perspective as well on this important initiative. So, David?
Yeah, and so this is where I put on my other hat with TRIDEC, and TRIDEC is the Tri-City Development Council. We are the CRO, the Community Reuse Organization for the Hanford site. We were formed in 1963 as the Tri-Cities Nuclear Industrial Council, really with a focus even back then on advocacy for supporting the Hanford mission at the time, as well as continuing to grow and diversify the Tri-City economy. Today we have a 39-member board of directors, which includes an elected official from each of our local governments, the largest employers in the community, as well as hospitals and educational institutions. And Brian already referenced the Clean Up to Clean Energy trademark, but Sandra Haynes, who is the chancellor of Washington State University, Tri-Cities, came up with that, but she's also our TRIDEC board chair, so I have to be especially careful to give credit where credit is due there. But in recent years, there's been a lot of recognition that we do need to decarbonize, and the Congress has passed a number of bills to really take us in that direction. The administration and previous administrations have recognized that as well. And so in the Tri-City community, that really we've always had a focus on energy kind of directly and indirectly associated with the Hanford site. Again, President Kennedy came to the Hanford site in I think 1963 to celebrate the addition of power generation to the in-reactor, supportive of what's now the Columbia Generating Station, the only operational commercial nuclear reactor in the Pacific Northwest. And we have an extremely robust hydropower system in our region as well. But many of you in the room might recall during the Obama administration, I believe it was during Monica Regalbuto's tenure as EM1, there was this idea of energy parks at cleanup sites, and to help those communities and their economies kind of transition as cleanup winds down to what's next. And so in the Tri-Cities, we created what's called the Mid-Columbia Energy Initiative, or MCEI. I think that was in 2008 or 2009, and we've been working in earnest together as a community ever since then to really support a pretty wide variety of energy-related opportunities. We have four, I guess, primary focus areas. One is nuclear energy and technology, hydrogen, transportation, as well as energy storage, building off of the great work that Pacific Northwest National Laboratories does in that space. And what's, I think, unique about our MCEI group is that we have a broad group of folks from educational institutions, from industry, and it's gotten a lot of great support from, again, PNL as well as Energy Northwest, which operates our Columbia Generating Station. Between those two entities, they're leading all four of our subcommittees, along with Diane Howard from the Port of Benton on the nuclear side as well. But we've been kind of building this ecosystem or local infrastructure and partnerships for well over a decade now, and with this kind of scenario we find ourselves in now, where there's new funding opportunities available, new focus areas for the administration, we feel like the time is right to really capitalize on all the work that's been done for more than a decade now. And again, to Sandra Haynes' credit, this idea of this motto of clean up to clean energy, in 4 words, I think it does such a good job of describing what we're all about. We want to see the Hanford site cleaned up, done safely, effectively, and efficiently, but then to really be a national and a global leader in the clean energy space, in developing some of these new technologies, demonstrating them and deploying them in the Tri-City community. And so much of that, we really want to get started, as Diane mentioned in the panel before this, on 1,641 acres of land that was former Hanford land that was transferred to the community. We're going to have a solar project on part of it, but for another part of it, we feel like it would be an excellent place to demonstrate how you do net zero manufacturing, how you do implement and kind of try out some of these new technologies. We are 87 to 95% carbon free now. We want, as a country, eventually to be entirely carbon neutral or carbon free. And as Bob Schutz, who's the CEO of Energy Northwest, says, if you can't do it in the Tri-Cities, you can't do it anywhere. But if you do want to do it somewhere and kind of take those lessons learned and apply them to other places, then again, we're a great place to do that. And we appreciate, especially again the capabilities that we have as a result of Pacific Northwest National Laboratories being in our community, Washington State University, Columbia Basin College, but also the opportunities to partner with the Hanford site leadership, starting smaller, starting big, to kind of join forces to do other things that can help decarbonize portions of the mission at the Hanford site. And I think when you bring all the different entities that we have together as a community, I think there's some really good things that we can do that support not only the Department of Energy's missions at PNL, at Hanford, but also more broadly.
Yeah, thanks, David. And now we're at the portion of the program which is called our speed run, which is the 1-minute challenge, which means I'll ask each of you to tell us what your biggest challenge is within and describe your concern and the way you're handling it within a minute. And I'll just remind Val and Bob and Wes, I'm the moderator and not your customer today. So Bob.
Wow. I think for me, the biggest challenge is we are moving rapidly. The world around us is moving rapidly. The supply chain is moving rapidly, and the biggest challenge for us is to stay ahead of that rapid movement. And I think for us to overcome that is through these partnerships, through these dialogues, through the interconnections we have that we've established, and I think that allows us to maintain resiliency in our ability to adapt when things change, because they will change, right? We're in the change business. and that is always the biggest challenge. And for us is to be able to adapt and maneuver around when that happens, and to do it in a way that allows us to be more strategic as much as we possibly can and not reactive after it's happened to us.
Great. Val?
Yeah, pretty similar too. I think I described the current environment we're in as a new workscape, and it's very different. You know, it's kind of unprecedented times coming out of the pandemic, and still somewhat in it, and supply chain impacts, inflationary impacts, new ways of working with, we went to telework to now hybrid, but that is a new way of working, and we're trying to adapt through that, understand how that all works. People making life choices to retire, go do something else, have more flexible options. So I think for me, Brian, it's the biggest challenge is navigating through this new workscape, which it's unclear how long it's going to be, what's going to change. Is this the new normal? Is it a phase of getting into another sort of normal? And so navigating through that smartly so that we can advance the mission at the same time. So the workforce challenges and those things, we're all taking steps to mitigate where we can, understand it, but I do think it's the working together, especially at Hanford. It's very important that we continue the partnership and talking about it, helping each other as we navigate through it together. But I think that's the biggest thing in my view right at the moment is this new workscape.
Great, thanks, Val. Steve?
Yes, I'll speak from the laboratory perspective at large, and it's easy. The answer is workforce as well. It's keeping the people we've got and getting more of them. We need to grow to over 6,000 staff to meet the demands for our capabilities from various sponsors. We're in a very tight and competitive job market, and it's complicated. That's hard enough, and I'm very grateful to the DOE Office of Science for giving us great flexibility in the compensation packages we can offer to be competitive for that world-class workforce. But then you layer on top of it, we've made a commitment to go with a hybrid P&L going forward, not just during the duration, but post-pandemic. And one of the biggest things I'm worried about there is how do I perpetuate a culture, especially with respect to innovation and safety, when I have maybe 12% of my workforce virtual and about 40% of it in a hybrid environment. To me, that's the biggest question about the success of a hybrid workforce and workplace, is can we maintain that culture that is so important to our ability to deliver?
Great, thanks, Steve. Wes?
It's a common theme. It's all about the workforce, recognizing the challenges that every one of those guys just mentioned, but recognizing also as part of not only recruiting and retaining, but we are at the point where we're turning over the workforce. So when you recognize, I've got an employee that was a barista 2 months ago, and they're now headed, to be an NCO and run the ConOps aspect. It's recognizing what that transformation is, not only for them as an individual, but on the other end of the scale, we've got recognizing the challenge of the way we've always lived our life at Hanford to the transformation we're going to now with a production mindset and everything that's involved in that.
Great. And before I get to David, we will have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience, so if you're interested, move to the microphones, and I'll turn it over to David for his speed run.
All right, well, I kind of referenced it earlier, but in the Tri-Cities as a community, we're facing some challenges that we really haven't had to face in the past. We're now a community of 315,000 people. 20 years ago, we were almost half that size, and so there's just been really accelerated growth. I would echo what basically the rest of the panel said on the workforce side of things. Also, availability and affordability of housing is a new issue that we're tackling now, that at least as a community that we haven't had in the past. And then, for the sake of speed, the only thing I'll also mention is just there's so much kind of opportunity out there. There's so much excitement. There's so many balls that we have in the air. Kind of trying to figure out what to really focus on, and which are the ones that we really want to narrow in on, because there's just a lot of capabilities and opportunities and ways that we might be able to, again, partner with P&L, with Hanford, and just kind of narrowing in on the things that we feel like are the both best service to the kind of the national needs, as well as opportunities to create jobs and continue to grow the economy in the Tri-Cities.
Great, thanks. I think we have one question out there. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian, quick question about the test bed initiative. Now that the NRC has authorized the weir determination, what is the schedule for phase 2 of the testbed initiative, the 2,000 gallons to grout and ship off-site?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. And I never answer schedule questions in panels, so I'll just say, right now we're working our way through conforming the comments from the NRC into the weir. It will go through its standard process within the department, and then we'll resubmit our permit application to Washington Department of Ecology, likely in the first half of next year to start that process. And so we still remain committed to moving that mission forward, that capability forward. I think it's important to demonstrate the regulatory process to get to grout at Hanford, and we see this as a very viable way to do that. And we'll work with the Washington Department of Ecology through the permitting process to make that a reality as efficiently as we can. So thanks for the question. Okay, well that concludes the panel. I really appreciate your engagement, and I hope that the hour was well spent. Feels like it didn't last very long to me, but that's probably how panels are supposed to feel. I hope it was informative, and I want to appreciate certainly the great panel members, so thank you all, and I appreciate the time today. Thank you.